Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Dr. Prosper Tettey Doe. I'm in the UK. I'm an African. And I'd like to present to you Africa Speaks, the World Listens. This is in honor of all our Africans and the great contribution that Africans have made to world civilization. And I'll start by reading a story from an African child from a book that was written by Sarah Eyiram Doe, as narrated by her father, Dr. Prosper Tettey Doe. The king replied, "Give the living child to the first woman. Don't kill him. She is his mother." All Israel heard about the decision the king made. They respected the king very highly because they saw he possessed wisdom from God to do what was right. 1 Kings chapter 3, verses 27 to 28. Now, the story. Once upon a time, there lived two women. Mary was good and Peggy was bad. They both had babies on the same day. Mary helped people in the village with jobs like fetching water, feeding the sheep, goats, and cows, and cooking. She also took care of the children when their parents were busy. All the children loved Mary, and she was very popular with the older people. One day, Peggy took her baby to visit her sister who lived in the same village as Mary, to stay with her for a few days. But her sister wasn't in. She had no place to stay and didn't know when her sister was coming back. She decided to write a letter and push it under her door to let her know she had come around to see her. Just before she wrote the letter, Mary, who was coming back after some errands, saw Peggy alone with a baby on her sister's doorstep. She took Peggy home and gave her milk to feed her baby. Unknown to Mary, Peggy was treacherous and wasn't a friend of the children in her village. When night time came, the two women went to bed. As Peggy slept, she rolled onto her baby and it died. When Peggy woke up and saw this, she crept into Mary's room. When she saw Mary was still fast asleep, she switched her dead baby and took Mary's baby. Peggy put the dead baby on Mary's bed and went back into her room. In the morning, Mary saw there was a dead baby beside her and realized that was not her baby. Mary and Peggy argued that the dead baby was not their baby, that the living baby was their baby. So they went to King Solomon to settle it for them. Now, King Solomon was a very wise king. He sat on his throne and asked the two women to come before him with a living baby. A sparrow met the two women at the palace. He started singing, "If you do me good, God will pay you. If you do me bad, God will pay you. Oh, 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 oh." The bear also sang the same song with a deep growling voice. "If you do me good, God will pay you. If you do me bad, God will pay you. Oh, 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 oh." The women continued to argue when they came before the king, each saying the living baby was their baby. So the king looked at the two women and ordered that the living baby be divided into half and half given to each woman. The bad woman shouted, "Yes." The good woman cried out, "No." The king decided to intervene and to give the baby to the good woman. The bad woman left the palace, ashamed and crying. The good woman left the palace happy and lived with her baby. The moral for us is, if you take good care of others, you will be rewarded. Now, we're going to the second in this presentation, which is from the book, which is the Nile Valley Contribution to Civilization, which is Exploding the Myths, Volume 1 by Anthony C. Browder. And this is an introduction which is by Dr. John Henrik Clark. Now, the civilization of Egypt and of Africa in general is the most written about and the least understood of all known subjects. This is not an accident or an error in misunderstanding the available information. Except for Egypt, African people have been programmed out of the respectable commentary of history. Europeans have claimed the non-African creation of Egypt in order to do and downgrade the position of African people in world history. They have laid the foundation of what they call Western civilization on a structure that the Western mind did not create. In doing so, they have used no logic. Egypt, a Nile Valley civilization, was already old before Europe was born. Nile Valley civilization also existed before the Western Asian civilization of the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. This fact was acknowledged for years by the European academic hypocrites who thought they had gotten away with claiming Egypt as a European or at least Asian creation. The archaeological research of Europeans disproved their claim. They could not find a single artifact in Western Asia or in mainland Asia that was older than the artifacts of Nile Valley civilization or Africa in general. This revelation created a new dilemma for the European claimants of Egypt. They were saying, in effect, figuratively speaking, a child gave birth to himself, then he created his own mother. So the book Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization is about correcting some of these misconceptions so that the reader is introduced to a Nile Valley civilization in order to understand its role as the parent of future civilizations. When we speak of Nile Valley civilization and its contribution, it must be considered that we are not talking about Egypt alone. We are referring to a strip of geography that extends over 4,000 miles into the body of Africa, and that touches on a multiplicity of civilizations in Africa. It was indeed the last great civilization in Africa. The country the Greeks called Egypt was never referred to as such by Africans during its formative period. What became Egypt was a composite of a number of nations using the Nile River as the world's first cultural highway. The rehearsal for what would become Egypt occurred in the south, in the nations known on present maps as Ethiopia, the Sudan, and adjacent territories. And the narrative goes on. Ladies and gentlemen, tributaries of rivers in these nations fed into the Nile. and made it the great historical river of the world. In technology, Nile Valley civilization gave the world an achievement in building and in spirituality over and above anything any nation or people have achieved before or since. Out of the Nile Valley civilization came the world's first organized spiritual literature. This literature was so profound, some of it inspired the writing of the Bible. The three major Western religions, Hebrewism, Christianity, and Islam, were extracted from the spirituality created by the priests and wise men in the Nile Valley. Early in its history and its development, Nile Valley civilization created a basic way of life that attracted teachers, technocrats, and priests from other parts of Africa, always enriching the original composition of the Nile Valley. Organized farming and domestication of animal life gave the population a more than adequate food supply. Therefore, Egypt could attract workers from other parts of Africa. Some of these workers were farmers for part of the year and builders another part of the year. At the time, the Nile was overflowing its banks and depositing rich soil on adjacent farmland. The workers and craftsmen were building on the high ground away from the river. The assumption that this great period of building required a massive use of slaves is an assumption and nothing more. When you look at the pyramids, the Sphinx, and the great temples in Egypt and the Nile Valley, you have to consider the fact that no slaves would have built with such skill and exactness. Many of these structures have been standing 6,000 years or more, and they are still around. Isn't that wonderful? The word slave and the image of the slave as worker is a recurring image in the mind of Western man. It is hard for him to conceive of extended work of this nature without the use of forced labor. The factor that has not been taken into consideration is a great flowering of spiritual fervor and commitment before the formation of organized religions. A factor in the matter still not understood is that the Africans tried to bring man in harmony with nature. Western man tries to defy nature and often forgets that man cannot start a hurricane or stop one, that before the force of nature, man is small and puny. The European mind, with all its misconceptions, wants to rule everything, including the elements. When you consider the Nile Valley civilization also includes Sudan and Ethiopia, and the contribution to civilization then becomes more massive. The parent of what would later be called Egyptian civilization came from the south. The first organized society was in the south. The evidence of an ancient mining complex that is older than the existence of Egypt has been found in the south. There are more than a dozen pyramids in the Sudan, indicating that the rehearsal for pyramid building started in the south. Europeans have problems with this revelation because they assume Black Africa presupposed a legitimate white Africa. What they forget is that everybody in Africa who cannot be referred to as an African is an invader or the descendant of an invader. The Arab invasion of Africa started about 632 AD. The fact that the Arabs have been in Africa over 1,000 years does not rule out the fact that they are invaders and part of a massive occupying army. At the time Egypt was getting its great civilization shown on the road, the Arabs did not exist as a people. Like all invaders, they too have done Africa more harm than good. Tony Browder is one of the latest of a number of messengers attempting to tell the story of the Nile Valley contribution to civilization. For 37 years, in the classroom of Howard University, William Leo Hansberry made an attempt to get this message across to nearly 2 generations of students, and he died before his massive 4-volume work on the subject could be published. Willis N. Huggins, in the Harlem History Club of the 30s, made the same attempt until his death in 1940. The Jamaican-born J.A. Rogers devoted over 50 years of his life in the study of the role of African personalities, both men and women, in world history. Carter G. Woodson, in his book, African Background Outlined, and W.E.B. Du Bois, in his work, The World and Africa, added a new dimension to the search for Nile Valley contributions to world civilization and Africa in general. George G. M. James challenged the assumed originality of Greek philosophy and indicated its Nile Valley origins. In recent years, the greatest explanation of Nile Valley contributions to world civilization has been made by African historians themselves. In the work of Sheikh Anta Diop, I call your attention to his book, African Origins of Civilization, Myth or Reality, and the last book finished before his untimely death, Civilization or Barbarism. Sheikh Anta Diop's finest essay on this subject is included in the Nile Valley edition of the Journal of African Civilization. The essay is called African Contribution to Civilization, the Exact Sciences. In his book, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, Tony Browder has associated himself with some top-level academic company. He is both a teacher and a learner. In both cases, he has done well. Thus says John Henrik Clark in April 1992. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the first episode of the series. And thank you for your attention. And note, Africa speaks and the world listens at long last.